Good evening. This is Redwood Wonk on Access Humboldt. My name is Eric Kirk. I'm with Chuck Rogers. We got to just get started because there is so much to talk about. And unless you object, I think first thing we need to talk about is the COVID bill.
Okay, yeah.
Any problem with that? Obviously, we have the COVID bill, a threat to veto it. Apparently, somebody wants the President Trump isn't happy with the fact that the Republicans negotiated it down from 1,200 to 600. He wants 2,000, which Toomey and other Republicans have already rejected. So he's trying to, and a lot of Trump supporters are trying to make it sound like the Democrats wanted it to be only 600, and forgetting that Harris and Bernie and I forget who else had suggested a 2,000 a month, actually retroactive going back, but. He says he wants 2,000. How serious is he about it? We don't know. Pelosi immediately called the bluff and said, hey, we can do this by unanimous consent. We can do 2,000 up the amount. Apparently, some in Congress, including Ocasio-Cortez, have already have a bill right there ready to go. The question is, and she wants to do it by unanimous consent. Question is, what do the Republicans do about this?
Right.
And what position does this put the two Republicans who are running in Georgia in? What do they say? Because, what do they say if this doesn't happen and the Democrats, Warnock and Ossoff, run on a campaign of, hey, we're going to honor President Trump's last wishes? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think this puts the Republicans in the toughest position, the Republicans in Congress and the Republicans in Georgia. I think this is all about Donald Trump trying to punish those Republicans who have split with him and have begun saying, yeah, Joe Biden is president-elect, and let's move on. I think that's what this is about. I think he's intentionally putting Republicans in a difficult position to punish them for disloyalty, or what he sees as, what his narcissistic personality perceives as disloyalty. And I think that's
for not supporting this military coup. We'll talk about that later.
Well, yeah, the whole thing, just trying to move on into the future. I mean, that's what he sees as disloyal to him, and he can't accept that. I don't know if you see it that way, but that's how I see it. There's really no other reason for it, and here's why. The administration had a chance to weigh in on this long ago, and so if he had wanted to insist on $2,000 for this payment, they could have done that long before this was even voted on, but they didn't do that.
No, Mnuchin was pushing for the $600 in his involvement in the negotiations. So he pretty much blindsided not just the Republicans in Congress, but his own staff, his own people that were there negotiating.
Yeah, and so what has happened since then is that the administration has lost all of these except for one. I think they're 1 and 59 in court at this point. They've lost all those cases, and now they're seeing a lot of Republicans saying enough is enough. President-elect Joe Biden, let's figure this out. Let's get the transition going. And so that's why this came up. He's trying to sabotage the whole bill now and punish the Republicans. And it does put them in a no-win situation, for sure. And we have these Georgia runoffs coming up on January the 5th, and voting already going on in record or near record numbers, depending upon which part of the state you look at. So they're in a no-win situation.
I agree. I mean, this puts them in a real bind. Pelosi just didn't even hesitate. I mean, she tweeted right away, "Hey, go for it, Trump. We're $2,000. Great." And that was, and it doesn't look like any Democrats are objecting. So it puts it completely into the lap of McConnell and the Republicans. Toomey was the one who insisted that it be reduced from $1,200 to $600.
Yeah.
And so. They've been silent on this all day. I've been looking for comments from McConnell. Of course, we're talking. This is December 23rd. Wednesday, December 23rd. This all happened last night, and I don't know what the Republicans do with this. I mean, they are in a
Yeah.
jam.
They really are. If they reject this, they're going to make everybody mad. Most people who have these bills that are upon them and eviction notices on the horizon could use the $2,000. So if people like, Kevin McCarthy, for example, what does he do? How does he come down on this? Because, I'm sure there are people in his district around Bakersfield who would like to have that $2,000, don't you think? And instead of 600, so what does he do? Does he split with the president on this? What kind of position does that put him in? So this is a difficult one, and I cannot imagine that the Republicans are happy about this. I don't know what they're going to do, and I don't see a really good way out for them. On the one hand, they're waving the budget flag and spending flag and all that. On the other hand, they know in their minds that their constituents need that $2,000 and have needed it for a long time. This is late in coming for sure. So this is one of the more difficult binds that I can recall recently.
Yeah, and on top of it, McConnell was returning to the economic sabotage, that he had been doing for 6 years under Obama, not allowing any spending that wasn't offset by other spending, to deny any Keynesian. They made an attempt last week to even deny him the Federal Reserve, which was how Obama basically got us to creep out of the recession with the help of the woman who is now Secretary Treasury when she was in the Federal Reserve. And so they're trying to deny everything. That was their agendas. They want to basically have the economy in bad shape, if not for the full 4 years, for the next 2 years, so that they can retake the House and maybe expand their lead in the Senate in 2022. If this $2,000 per person goes through, it's going to give Biden a big boost coming right out of the gate. And so that's completely undermined. But Trump isn't a team player. He's not there for the Republicans. No. He doesn't care about their agenda. He's in it for Trump.
Exactly.
So they've got a real problem on their hands. They've created this. I'm sorry, they deserve it, but it's just about the only hope they have of getting out of this is if Trump says, "Oh, I was just kidding." That's
and not only that, they have a deadline on this, and it's coming up. They have to make a decision soon. This is not something they can stew about for a long time and figure out the best way forward. They have to decide, and they have to decide soon. So I have really no prediction on how this is going to go, because the Republicans are going to have a difficult problem either way they go on this with some cohort of their constituency. So.
Yeah, they are. And people are going to be hurt. People are hurting now. People are going to be evicted. Businesses are starting to collapse because of this, despite the fact that the vaccines are out, and 2 vaccines are out and being distributed. But even that's kind of a hassle. They haven't really organized well enough. Everybody is waiting for Biden to get in there to organize a distribution thing, because the Trump, apparently this Operation Warp Speed, it wasn't ready to actually distribute, and there's miscommunication going to the states who were expecting bigger numbers of dosages. And some military guy, I'm forgetting his name already, tried to fall on the sword for Trump on it, saying, "Oh yeah, that was my fault." But the point is it's not happening. Biden did get the vaccination and actually praise Operation Warp Speed, but that had nothing to do with the Pfizer medication. They're a German company. They didn't take any federal funds, but so people are hurting. They need this aid. All of a sudden, all these conservatives who were cheering that they got reduced from 1,200 to 600, saying, well, this is just giveaway, free stuff. All of a sudden, a bunch of them have reversed themselves. It's like that moment in Orwell. Of course, this has happened a lot with Trump. That moment in 1984 where they were at war with Oceania or whatever, and all of a sudden it turned out they were at war with Eurasia, and I probably got the names wrong, but and all of a sudden people just had to go start running, tearing down the anti Oceania posters and putting up anti Eurasia posters, but they did that. I mean, I'm literally in discussions with like a local public figure. I'm not going to give his name out, but he's somebody who shows up in politics a lot. And he's just like saying, oh, yeah, we need the 2,000. The Democrats wanted to deprive them of 2,000 because $600 is pathetic. When a few days ago, this very guy was cheering to me in knocking it from 1,200 to 600. And they just do this as their eyes glaze over and talk about how strong Trump is as he's throwing tantrums. I have never seen anything like this before. This is like the 9/11 truthers on steroids and add millions, multiplying by millions, because this is a mass dilution on a major scale. And I don't know what we do with this. We discussed this a little bit last week, but it is so far out of reality. And we're watching this, and I don't know what McConnell does, because he looks weak either way.
Yeah, he does. And this is just more evidence for the fact that this is an unrepresentative system we're in. It's not really about us. It's about the politics in Washington, not about the people in the various constituencies around the country. And that's why people hate politics and politicians. This is a great example.
It really is. I guess we need to move on. Anything else on the COVID? I mean, there are a few other things in there. I think they were hoping to have some leverage later to get the Democrats to agree to the immunity issues for businesses that force their workers to return to the office to do that. And I would actually support it if the businesses would be required to make a showing that they followed either the CDC guidelines or their state guidelines, whichever is more stringent. If they follow that, then I would say, sure, give them immunity. But if not, I say no. The Democrats didn't allow that, and I think that McConnell was hoping to be able to offer more money or something like that. But if this somehow gets passed, they don't have leverage to push that in January.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. If they had put that stipulation in there, I would support it too. But for people who did not follow the protocols, they should be liable. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, that's it. But I think what the Republicans are looking for is blanket immunity.
Exactly.
Just you can't sue on this. So
that's
anyway,
their constituency. Yeah,
that's their constituency. I mean, we talked a bit about that. Trump also vetoed the defense bill, which I think that the defense bill is bloated, has been bloated for years. $740 billion on a Cold War that no longer exists, to pay for the creation of a lot of weapons that the Pentagon hasn't even asked for, just so that various Congress people can have the jobs for their constituents, for making things that are not only not required by the military, but just adding to the potential destruction of the planet. And I'm all for that, but that's not why he's vetoing it.
No, it's not. And you're right. The defense bill has been bloated for decades because of trying to help out individual people in Congress in their home districts. And that's why it's gotten to the point where it is now. But the reason he vetoed it is because he does not want bases to change their names, the names that honor Confederate generals. He's opposed to renaming bases that are named after Confederates. And this bill would have required those name changes. So that's why he vetoed it. Here again, this puts Republicans in a difficult situation. What do they do? What are they going to do on this?
Yeah, it's really funny about the Confederate names and the rest because online so often you hear people saying, well, the slave owners were Democrats. This is your legacy. Well, then why is it the Republican Party that's always trying to defend the Confederate flag or the trophies for participation statues, most of them weren't made way back when fresh out of the Civil War or even in the early 1920s. The bulk of them were made in resistance of the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s as a defense against federal intervention. So why is this such an important issue for Republicans if this is the Democratic Party's legacy? But we're also talking about a time when Abraham Lincoln was endorsed by Karl Marx, and Lincoln actually expressed gratitude for that endorsement. So it was a very different time. Doesn't apply, but I find that very interesting.
Yeah, and it is true that the Republican Party was formed as an abolitionist party at Ripon College in Wisconsin, I believe, 1856. So yeah, it was the abolitionist party at the time, but the things change with all political parties over time, and part of the reason that what your person, whoever you're talking about there, is referring to is that the conservative wing of the Democratic Party for years, until the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act in the 1960, did have that Southern conservative strain in it, and they had a deal with the Republicans, especially from the North and the Northeast, Upper Midwest and the Northeast, to get things done from the 1920s up through the 1950s. And then things began to splinter after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and conservative Democrats became Republican at that time, and liberal Republicans became Democrats. So that's how things got sorted out. Yeah, go ahead.
And the first major transfer happening during the New Deal when African Americans switched parties in the 30s, and we've actually discussed this in the past. But I don't know if that's not the only reason he vetoed it. He also is objecting. He wants other things in there that will allow for lawsuits against social media and the rest. And so there's other agendas there. But I also think it's probably just an additional partying FU to the Republicans who won't support his military coup, just like the COVID.
I think you're probably right. And, once again, kind of following on that, once again, we have this Russian hack, and he has come out and said, well, I don't know that it was Russia, and we don't think anything really bad was going on. So once again, putting people in Congress in a difficult situation. So, a lot of commentators think he's just trying to burn the whole house down as he leaves because he's mad and angry, and he wants to punish the whole country for not reelecting him. That could be what it comes down to.
Yeah, maybe a reset. All right, real quickly, I want to talk a little bit about the pardons. Papadopoulos, the four of the Blackwater people who were killing people and probably got a lot of American soldiers killed. Blackwater being a mercenary group that went into Iraq and just wreaked havoc with brutality. Manafort, what's his name? The one that Christie prosecuted, Kushner's father, Charles Kushner. Michael Stone.
Roger Stone.
I know I'm forgetting somebody. Duncan Hunter and people who were busted for insider trading and the rest. I mean, he is just. It's if you're connected, you're getting these things, and I would like to know if anybody out there could do some research and let us know. But with Kushner Sr. getting that pardon, I wonder if that's the first time a relative of a president, even by marriage, has gotten a pardon.
Well, I don't know, and I think there's more to come. I think he's going to pardon, most of the people in his own family and try to pardon himself, and that's going to end up in in the Supreme Court. But this is just, you mentioned we're recording this on the 23rd. I think today alone there were something like 26 pardons. And for people who, here's the thing about the pardons. The reason it's there is to find justice and mercy for people who have served some time, and maybe there's some question as to whether they were or weren't convicted properly in the first place, rightly or wrongly. So there is a reason for it to be there, but it is being misused in the worst possible way right now. And you mentioned the Blackwater folks. That's an organization that's headed by Eric Prince, who is the brother of the Secretary of Education right now, and Betsy DeVos. And so that, and he also pardoned Duncan Hunter's wife, who was also convicted in the same scams that they were running. So it's a complete misuse, and it does so much damage to justice in the United States and people's perceptions that there are those who are, in fact, above the law because of their connections. And those of us who can't afford to buy the connections are on our own. That's exactly the signal that's being sent, and it's very destructive. And I'm very concerned about it. You're in that field. Tell me what folks are saying.
Oh, it's just it's absolutely bizarre. I mean, it is just we have not seen this. We have seen some questionable things, people being pardoned. I mean, of course, one of the big ones was Ford pardoning Nixon, and then trying to convince everybody that there was no deal, right? And we've seen some questionable pardons. Problem is, there's no limit. There's no limitation put on the pardon. You can't overturn it based on conflict of interest or anything like that. It's absolute. That's the idea, is to give the president an absolute right to do that. The concept, the spirit of it is supposed to be justice. Like I was kind of happy with him when he pardoned Susan B. Anthony for what she had been prosecuted for, falsely voting and the rest. That's all fine. That's stuff that you can do. I think Carter pardoned both Robert E. Lee and John Brown. I mean, it's just I see that kind of a thing. And then people who are that maybe they did do something wrong, but the feeling like justice is done, and that it's time to let somebody out. It just but. That's not what's happening here. If you're connected, if you've got connections, and he's got some, and he wants you to owe him favors, you're getting the pardon that you've asked for. And there've been a lot of powerful people lobbying him on these pardons, and he's just giving them out like candy.
Yeah, it sounds like you just defined authoritarianism. There is an office within the United States Department of Justice where these things are supposed to go to, and the folks in that office review the case. They find out whether the person is remorseful or whether there was a wrongful prosecution, wrongful conviction, whatever it is. And they write a report and they send it to the executive branch, to the White House, and then the president makes a decision. None of that was done. He's just getting out a pen and signing pardons for the people he wants to, without regard to looking at what's going on in the Justice Department and letting them figure out whether this is justified or not. None of that's being done. He's going around all that and just pardoning people who have been loyal to him, and that's it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, I agree, and we'll be talking about those for the weeks to come, because there's probably a lot more coming. Talking about pardoning Snowden, which would be fine with me, but again, his motivations for doing these things, same reason his motivations of wanting the 2000. Maybe he wants something to show that he can run on in 2024, or maybe maybe it's an FU. We don't know, but I do want to get to, because we need to talk about this a little bit, but because some very interesting developments with regard to the media, and particularly the right-wing media. As you know, Fox News, Lou Dobbs and Judge, what's her name that I always forget her name, and I think at least one other person, and along with Newsmax and One American News Service, whatever it is, have all received letters from the attorneys of Smartmatic, which is the company that has the contracts for the machines, the voting machines and the counting machines in several states and actually in other countries. They were trying to ignore it. They were being accused of all kinds of stuff, including being, collaborating with foreign governments to overturn the election by flipping votes. It really doesn't matter when there's a paper recount if there was an electronic flipping, and we would know that by now. But that being set aside, the accusations that they're using Dominion technology, which is probably going to issue their own cease and desist letters pretty soon, and that a switch was flipped in Venezuela. I mean, just all the boogeymen you can put out with no evidence, zero evidence, and it's hard to sue people in these contexts because they are a public figure, right, entity, and so you got to prove malice. And there are two parts of malice, two prongs, or not prongs, but two forms of malice under the famous New York Times decision, and that is one is if you actually lie deliberately, and the other is if you publish or broadcast something with a reckless disregard for the truth.
Right.
And they put out allegations that there is just no evidence for whatsoever, is contradicted by common sense, by all of the information. That's why they've lost 58 lawsuits and will probably lose 59 real soon. I think the only one they've actually kind of won was the one that got them additional observers, and that's even questionable as a win. But that is a really bad losing streak because they had no evidence. What they had was what comes from very weak, borderline crazy witnesses, or witnesses who saw something but didn't understand what they were seeing, or evidence, being interpreted by people that they didn't see. For instance, that video is not of suitcases; those are official, election containers, and they've got this real elaborate conspiracy theories of the Smartmatic machines flipping the votes, but so that they don't get caught in the paper trail. Somewhere in California, evil California, all these paper ballots arrived and were introduced that were for Biden, so that they don't get caught. I mean, it is so far out there. It doesn't even make for good writing. It's so bad, and so all of a sudden, Fox News' lawyers were in a panic. They said, you're going to get hit, because if Smartmatic and these other companies lose contracts, these are big contracts with entire states in which the officials are getting death threats and threats from their own party. So are they going to want to renew those contracts? Plus, exactly. They started to get calls from clients from other countries saying, what's going on here? The president is saying that you're part of this sinister thing. So they had their attorneys write a very long, detailed letter. Fox News and Newsmax went into a panic. They broadcast these very kind of weak, contrary information. They put on some guy, who said, I don't see any evidence of this, an expert or whatever. But they aren't retractions. And they aren't Fox News coming out and saying, we got carried away. Please don't believe this, because, boy, if we get hit with these judgments, we could end up in chapter whatever, and Fox News might be able to survive those judgments. I don't think Newsmax or OAN can. No. And I don't even know if they're bothering to sue Alex Jones. But it's just but it turns out that you can't just throw anything you like because it's politically convenient and because your hero in the Oval Office is saying it. You can't just do that. You have some responsibility as a news source, and you're in trouble, and they're in trouble.
You know what? That's the law of defamation, and anybody who went to journalism school would have had to have taken a lot of classes in that, sometimes taught by attorneys. And the mistake that Fox made, and the mistake that Newsmax made, and all the other ones, the prong that applies here, and you're correct about it, is reckless disregard for the truth. This is something that was easily checkable, easily. Because the numbers were there, the vote tallies were there. This is the problem with Fox and Newsmax deciding to move away from journalism and toward just being the PR wing of the Republican Party, and in this case, the Trump Party, and just taking whatever Donald Trump says, whatever his grievance is, and broadcasting it, publishing it, that is, in legal terms, that's the publication of it, as if it's the truth, knowing that it's wrong, knowing that it is checkable, that they didn't check it. If they did, they chose not to go with the truth. That's where they got into trouble. They got into trouble because they became mouthpieces for Donald Trump. And they harmed the company you're talking about. And the questions that you referenced there from other countries does show there was harm. And when they can show harm and they can show that there was a reckless regard for the truth that might result in that kind of harm, they're going to lose, or they're going to have to come to some sort of out-of-court settlement or something, and it's going to be big because they can show harm. So,
because all of this doubt has been sown, if you're a public official, even if you think it's not true, do you want to take a chance on now this tainted company? This could put Smartmatic out of business.
Absolutely.
I mean, it could really do that. But even one state like Georgia or anything pulling out of that, that's a lot of money. I mean, this is absolutely huge, and other people are now starting to threaten lawsuits too. Now they've got somebody who worked for Dominion, who's receiving death threats, and the rest. He just declared lawsuit today, and they don't just name the companies; they will name the individuals.
Oh,
Lou
absolutely.
Dobbs, Sean Hannity, and they will be in trouble. I mean, they will go after them, even if they've got indemnity agreements with their companies, because I don't think the companies can cover these judgments.
Well, it's not only going to be Lou Dobbs and Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham. It's going to be the entire board of directors of Fox. It's going to be the board of directors of Newsmax, and any individual who is even remotely involved in this is going to be named. Now, not all of those might end up in the final suit, but the reason in defamation cases they're all named is that some of them may determine that I don't want any more of this. I'm gonna tell them exactly what I know. So that's what's going to happen. Some of those people who are sitting on the board, not even really involved in the day-to-day business of Fox and Newsmax, don't want to go down with that ship.
Right.
And they don't want their kids and their grandkids ruined financially for life. So some of them will try to do whatever they can to reveal whatever information they can. And one last thing on this. The bar for defamation is set very, very high, especially for public figures, because the courts have determined over the decades that they want public discourse to be vigorous. They want us to be talking about issues and debating and discussing and questioning people in power and speaking truth to power. All of that is good. But this is something that is so easily provable as wrong, and there is malice there, and there is harm there. And it's easy to see how there was a disregard for the truth here. So this is, I'm glad they're suing. I'm really glad they're suing, and they're not going to win. Trump and Fox and Newsmax are not going to win. They're going to have to either settle out of court or just go down with the ship.
I'm not sure if Trump can be sued. I don't know if he's named in that or whatever. I don't know what, the immunities are for public figures, but the news casters, maybe they'll learn not to be like Pravda.
Exactly. With regard to public figures, until I believe it was not that long ago, maybe in the 80s or 90s, there were very few public figures who could ever win a suit against a media organization because
I'm talking about as a public official, can Trump be sued? since he was
Well,
saying it in the course of his presidency.
that's what I'm talking about.
Oh.
There have been a couple of exceptions. Now, it's not been a president, but there have been a couple of exceptions. They're rare. They're very rare. My guess is that Trump will probably not be culpable in this, but the people who repeated everything that he was saying and obviously did not check something that's easily checkable and showed disregard for the truth and went ahead and published it anyway. And in this case, publication does refer to broadcast, not just print. And it also refers to online publication as well. So, you're right. Fox and Newsmax and One American Network and anybody else who went along with all of this nonsense, they're all in trouble for sure.
Yeah. And see, Newsmax was kind of reaping a little bit of a benefit because Fox News, and I actually have to say, I think Fox News, the actual news department, is fairly good when they're left alone. And they projected before even the quote unquote liberal networks that not Georgia, but Arizona was the winner. They projected that, very early. I think the night of the election or the very next morning anyway. And because of that, Trump got angry at them and people started leaving Fox and going to Newsmax. I actually came across an actual statement on Facebook. There's a group of sort of like a going to Parler, transition Parler being the new right-wing social media, that saying if it's not from Newsmax, it's BS. Only I'm using the initials, right? And Fox is now part of the liberal media elite and the rest. So I think that Fox probably got a little bit carried away because they were in a panic about losing that base, and now they've got a problem with this. And by the way, their fans and their viewers are not happy with the quote unquote retractions, as weak as they were. In fact, they're pointing out the weaknesses. All you did was have this guy come and say he didn't know it. You didn't have a full analysis of it. They're right. And that, why should you put something like that on there? I'd be mad if I was, in that delusional position. I'm sorry, but it, no, I mean, and I hate to say it, but I'm experienced in schadenfreude over this. I mean, I just, they really need to clear this up because I believe that the media, the right-wing media, is one of the reasons that we've got these different perceptions, this different stuff. And all of a sudden, if they get nailed, okay, there'll be a lot of people who say, oh, right, well, the deep state and the courts, or whatever, and, jurors are bought off, whatever it is they're going to come to believe. But other people are going to say, it's not happening in the liberal media.
Well, one other thing the courts try not to do, they try not to squelch the press. They want the press to be vigorous. They want the press to report vigorously, and that's a good thing. But let me throw one other wrinkle in here that could happen. Here's what could happen. Fox News, not the individuals, but Fox News, the company, the corporation, Newsmax, the corporation, not the folks on the air, but the corporations may figure out that they're in a world of hurt, and they might try to separate themselves and say, people like Sean Hannity and Lou Dobbs and Laura Ingraham and whoever the folks are on Newsmax were expressing opinions. Those shows are equivalent to the opinion page in a newspaper or the op-ed page in the newspaper and do not necessarily reflect the views of Fox Corporation nor Newsmax. So what you could have in a situation like this is internal suits. Fox News suing Sean Hannity, Lou Dobbs, and Laura Ingraham, trying to separate themselves in this case and say, this was not our fault. This was expressed on opinion shows, not on news shows. And they'll try to show that Sean Hannity, just as an example, is opinion and not news. That may be a defense that Fox tries to trot out. Whether it's successful or not, I don't know.
I don't think in this case, because you've got basically a company that was hurt because it was reported as news and because the company didn't do anything to counter it. I mean,
Mhm.
you got to be reasonable in it. They didn't have any news coverage that
Right.
actually says, like the rest of the news coverage. When they're allowed to do their jobs, I like the Fox News reporters, but I think they were probably instructed not to cover the story.
Yeah.
And,
And
you
the,
know,
the the problem with Hannity, for example, is that when something like this that is potentially damaging is being aired, they did not label it as opinion.
yeah,
Now, there have been times when Hannity has said off the cuff, maybe not even on the air, well, some of that's just me. But with something like this, it was not labeled as such at the time. Over how many times was this repeated?
right.
That's going to be part of their problem too, is that this
Yeah.
has been repeated ever since November the 3rd. So the fact that they've repeated it over and over and over instead of correcting it is going to be a problem for them.
Sean Hannity has actually admitted, I think, in court documents that he doesn't vet his stuff. He said, and he brags about it almost. I don't vet it. This is not my job. I'm not a journalist.
Well, actually,
So
it is his
just
job. If he,
yeah,
yeah, that's
I
him
know.
admitting to reckless disregard for the truth. That's
Right.
exactly what that is. That's an admission of reckless disregard for the truth.
You also when you're stating that it's an opinion, generally speaking, you're supposed to express it that way. Well, in my
Exactly.
opinion, or because it can be hyperbole, but we're not talking about hyperbole. We're talking about reporting of facts or stating facts as if
Right.
they're fact. And
Right.
anyway, well, we can move on from that, but this is huge. It's going to have an impact. I kind of wonder where some of the media reporters' rights groups are going to fall. They may not want this to happen. Maybe even the ACLU, for all I know. But on the other hand, it's just so basic. You also don't have if nobody has faith in the media because they can just go off like this. That hurts the media too. So we'll see how this goes. This is going to be subject of journalism and legal classes for decades
Well,
to come.
I can tell you that some of the organizations that journalists belong to have long been frustrated with Fox, for sure. And there are people who belong to some of those organizations, and there's a lot that's been written in industry journals over the years that some reform needs to happen. This is not working.
Yeah.
This siloed communication system, and you referred to it in the beginning, that we need to do something about it. And people in the business are all for trying to figure out how to make this better. So maybe some of that, maybe the discussion will be ratcheted up because of these situations that we're in right now. Let's hope so.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, I'm critical of CNN too. Not so much that they misrepresent facts. I don't think they do that. I think they do take the basic care, but they use in their reporting adjectives that don't belong in reporting. President Trump's ridiculous claims about the election. You don't need to do that. Let the facts speak for themselves. You don't need to interject, your adjectives. Leave them out of it. And I don't want to say that in any way that they or even MSNBC are the equivalent of Fox, and certainly not Newsmax. But I am critical of it as well. We do need a network, the national network. PBS is doing a pretty good job. NPR is actually considered pretty neutral, at least in terms of how they cover and the language they use. Maybe not in the stories they cover. It has more interest to certain groups of people. But, I have to say one of the most objective papers that I've actually enjoyed since college I go to is the Christian Science Monitor.
Mhm.
I mean, that's and it's not that they don't have agenda and they don't have their biases. They actually do have a little bit of I think, a liberal bias, which you're never going to not have. But they are objective and they attain objectivity. I really think CNN needs to crack down on the adjectives in particular.
Well,
But
you know what CNN would say to you? They would say, we'll be glad to do that as soon as Fox agrees to do that. But
yeah,
there needs to be a counterbalance to Fox. And so that's why the whole system needs to be reformed in some way. And that's going to be a heavy lift. I don't know how that's going to happen, but there is a need for it. I think it's reflective of how divided the country is. and how
Yeah.
politics has become part of everybody's identity, and tribal, if you want to call it that.
It is, and it is hardcore. I
Yeah.
mean, it is really bad. But all right, moving on from that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the impact of Senator Harris becoming the VP. She's going
Right.
to have to retire from the Senate in a few weeks. We have a selection from the Governor Gavin Newsom. There was a lot of pressure on him to appoint a African American woman. We were talking about Karen Bass and a few other people. But and there's a little bit of criticism coming from particularly the progressive circles, because I guess Senator Dianne Feinstein said, I want you to appoint Padilla, and apparently that's what he did. Now Padilla isn't bad. He's progressive, and he'll be a fine senator. But it doesn't really excite me. He's somebody who's been in statewide politics. He's in there for a while. But now, because Attorney General Becerra is going to the cabinet, and Padilla is going to he's going to be the senator. It's going to be very interesting to see how who replaces those two. And there's a few interesting identity politics problems here. One is right now that Harris is out, there are no African American women in the Senate, none, zero. So and maybe less of a concern, but it's the first time California hasn't had two women senators in 28 years. Now that's, that was going to be broken sooner or later, because eventually some man was going to get elected or appointed to the Senate. Yeah. But that leaves, a lot of people unhappy. But with these two picks, it would seem like he's got to pick at least one Latino, because you had two Latinos on the statewide level, being elected, and now there's none in statewide offices. So he'll probably have to pick one of those, and probably an African American woman for the other position. And I just don't know who's there. I don't know if Karen Bass, who everybody really a lot of people were hoping would be the pick for the senator, is really qualified to be either attorney general or, and I'm not saying she's not, I just don't know, or secretary of state, and who is going to be the other pick. There's a lot of speculation around that, and it's going to be very interesting to watch. I don't have any idea as to who will be picked for either of those positions.
Yeah, I don't either. Gavin Newsom, in some ways, is going to remake California government, and let's not forget that part of what he may be looking at is his political future, and he may be making some decisions with regard to those positions you talk about, with an eye toward constituencies he needs in whatever he wants to do next. So, and only he knows about that. I like Alex Padilla. I think I predicted on this show that he might be the pick.
You did.
Yes. Yeah, and the reason I did that goes to just what I was saying there, that Newsom will try to pick somebody who is not only qualified and would do a good job, but also with an eye toward his own political advantage. And he and Padilla and Kamala Harris have been, teammates in a way for their whole political careers. They kind of all emerged in different areas for different reasons at about the same time, and they all know each other. They've all worked together before. So I'm not surprised by the pick. Let me also point out that Padilla will walk into the U.S. Senate and immediately be one of the smartest persons in the room.
Yeah, he is smart.
He's an engineer from MIT who got involved in politics for the right reasons, because he saw how his immigrant parents were being treated. And I like to support people who get into it for the right reason, whether I agree with them 100% of the time or not. I prefer politicians who are in there because of public policy reasons and not because of narcissistic reasons. And Alex Padilla is one of those people. So, whether he's progressive enough for me, I don't know. But he's one of the decent people. And so I have I have high hopes that he'll go into the U.S. Senate and do a fine job, as you said.
We have that, and Newsom really has to work. He's got some public stuff. First of all, he's kind of kissed up to Trump a little bit. I'm sure he'll use the excuse that he had to play him to make sure he got the, FEMA stuff for the fires and all the rest. And there's that dinner party that he went to.
Yeah.
Absolutely shouldn't have done. So he's got to earn some points, and he's in a little bit of a bind. He's already kind of annoyed the people that wanted an African-American woman to replace Harris in the Senate. And he's got a bind. So it makes my choice a little bit counterintuitive, but we'll discuss that at the end of the show.
Okay.
We are at the position point of the show where we do our predictions. Chuck?
You want me to go first? Sure. Just quickly, my prediction has to do with January the 6th. That is the day when both houses of Congress are going to have to certify the Electoral College decision that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won the election. I predict there will be multiple people in each house of Congress who will raise objections. That's going to mean that they're going to have to debate 2 hours for each state that does have someone who objects, and there'll be plenty of that. It's going to go on for a long time. There won't be a vote that will overturn the Electoral College. But still, it's going to happen, and it will sow even more discord and even more distrust in our political system. It's just going to be one more bump that we have to go over, and more people are going to be upset about it. But I think, in fact, it is going to happen. There are multiple people now who say that they're ready to raise the objections about the Electoral College on January 6th.
Including Tuberville, who just defeated Doug Jones.
Right.
It probably, you talked about Padilla being the smartest guy. Tuberville, I'm sorry, it's probably going to be the dumbest guy in there, and it's just going to fit into all of the stereotypes of where he comes from and everything. It's going to be really bad. But anyway, my prediction for who will be the AG, and this is counterintuitive in light of what I said, because Gavin Newsom, a white governor, is under a lot of pressure. He's going to have, he's now removed two. Well, actually, he didn't remove the first one, but there are now 2 fewer Latinos on the statewide level, and he's under pressure because some of the people are upset with him over the lack of an African-American woman. Jared Huffman.
I thought that's what you were going to say.
I think he will be the next AG. My brain is telling me no, but my gut feeling is telling me right. First of all, he'd be an excellent choice for that position. You talk about smart. He is smart. I mean, I've interviewed him, and he knows the stuff. He knows how to present himself. Probably will make a run for governor, if not president someday. He's still on the young side, maybe not that young, but young. Anyway, that is my prediction. Like I said, I don't know, but he's moderate enough. But he's also going to do a real good job, and Gavin Newsom does need that to happen, because whoever he appoints has to do a good job, or doesn't reflect on Gavin Newsom when he runs for president, which he may very well do. Anyway, that's my.
Well, we'll see. That is counterintuitive. I've interviewed him a number of times too. He knows his stuff, and he's a nice guy and more than qualified. Politically, there could be an argument against that appointment, but we'll see what Newsom decides to do.
All right. In the meantime, I want to wish everybody out there a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and next week, Chuck and I are going to discuss our predictions, what came true, what didn't, and that will be our show next week. We'll probably have to talk about a couple other things as well. But until then, good night.